The NFL Draft unofficially marks the beginning of draft season for the professional sports leagues in the United States. The 3-day event takes place every year in late April or early May, and it's followed by the NBA and NHL drafts respectively, usually taking place in late June, and the MLB Draft, which previously took place during the first week of June, has been pushed back until mid to late July during recent years. All four of these events exist to serve the same purposes: for teams to fairly distribute incoming talent across the league based on team performance, and for the leagues to generate off-season hype and revenue for the teams. However, one does its job much better than the rest. The NFL Draft is one of the biggest spectacles on the NFL calendar, providing fans with an oasis of football content in the desert of the offseason. The entire process, starting unofficially at the Senior Bowl and passing through the Combine and College Pro Days before the 3-day finale itself, is a massive hype machine. And it's incredibly effective, with the first round of the draft pulling over 10 million viewers, 3 times the viewership of the NBA Draft, and completely dwarfing the MLB and NHL drafts. But why is that? What has the NFL done to make their draft so much more desirable for potential viewers? And is there anything the other leagues can learn from them in order to improve their own drafts? Perhaps the most important factor that the NFL doesn't even have control over is the dominance of college football. No other college sport comes close in terms of viewership and following, and in fact, college football at its highest level is more popular than even the NBA in the United States based on average viewership numbers. This gives the NFL Draft a massive head start. Millions of people have been following these players for years through their college career. Before the draft process even starts, people know who these players are, and the draft popularity proves that people are invested, especially when there's a possibility for them to be drafted by their favorite NFL team. Even college fans that don't necessarily follow an NFL team are more than eager to tune in and watch their school stars get selected. It is impossible to understate just how important the dominance of college football is for the popularity of the NFL Draft. In addition, by the nature of the NFL, the entire draft is important for team success. Teams must find stars and contributors in all 7 rounds in order to build a Super Bowl winning roster. The 2022 Chiefs, for example, won the Super Bowl with major contributors such as Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, Creed Humphrey, and Chris Jones, all having been selected outside of the first round. The other leagues, in contrast, see far fewer players drafted outside the first round becoming stars and contributors, at least in a timely fashion. The MLB Draft, for example, sees plenty of players drafted outside the first round go on to become contributors and stars. Nestor Cortez, for example, was drafted by the Yankees in the 39th round of the 2015 draft. However, Cortez didn't really catch traction in the MLB until 2021, and he made his first All-Star game in 2022, 6 and 7 years respectively after he was drafted. While careers like this make for fantastic narratives in baseball, they don't really help drive interest in a draft. The NHL Draft is a similar story. Both drafts always contain a strong presence of 18-year-old athletes who have graduated high school but haven't started college. And the majority of these players are 3 or more years away from playing in the NHL or MLB, making the draft less meaningful in the short term for fans who aren't as interested in the multi-year franchise building timeline that their teams are on. This, of course, isn't always the case. Top players in the NHL Draft, such as first overall pick Connor Bedard, are projected to make their NHL rosters immediately and provide a quick impact. However, there are never more than a few players who make their NHL rosters right away as rookies. These paths work for the MLB and NHL because they both have deep minor league systems in which they can put their developing prospects. An MLB team will have 6 or more minor league affiliate teams between AAA and rookie ball where they can put their prospects to develop, and an NHL team will have a full minor league team playing in the AHL. And teams will often assign their draft picks to return to college, juniors, or European teams from which they were drafted to play a couple more seasons for further development. The NFL does not have this league structure. Every draft pick must immediately earn a valuable spot on the 53-man roster, otherwise they will be released from the organization. Teams can assign up to 16 players to the practice squad, many of which are often rookies or recent draft picks. However, these players can be poached by other teams. This all might not matter that much anyways, given that NFL rookies are older, and therefore more physically developed with a better understanding of the game they play. However, we're going to get to that later. Going back to the other leagues, the NBA Draft is different as it suffers different problems from the NHL and MLB. The NBA Draft usually has a strong presence of one-and-done college athletes, the best of which often make a quick impact in the NBA, similar to the NFL. Where the NBA struggles is in its depth of big names in its draft classes. For some reason, the NBA just doesn't contain the number of high-profile stars that the NFL draft seems to have. This could be due to the nature of basketball limiting the number of great players that can develop on one team, or because basketball rosters themselves are relatively small compared to the other sports, or it could be something else entirely. A good example of the disparity was the 2021 NBA draft compared to the NFL draft in the same year. The NBA draft was headlined by 3 star players: Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, and Evan Mobley. These weren't the only good players from that class, of course, but to more casual fans, these were the biggest names of the evening. The NFL draft, on the other hand, had several star headliner players: Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, Penei Sewell, Pat Surtain, Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, and so many more. Of course, not all these players went on to become stars, and more than just the 3 mentioned from the NBA draft went on to become good players in the NBA. However, when the NBA draft is perceived to only have 3 stars compared to the NFL's draft with over a dozen big names, the NFL draft is bound to struggle to generate hype. A lot of casual fans would turn off the draft after the first 3 picks were made because those were the only 3 players from the draft that they knew. The common factor between all 3 leagues is the age at which the players are drafted. The best players in the MLB, NHL, and NBA drafts are often between 18 to 20 years old, whereas NFL draft picks are usually 21 to 23 years old or older. NFL eligibility rules require players to have been out of high school for at minimum 3 years before being draft eligible. These rules come from a good place, but they are definitely controversial and they deserve a future video of their own. But for now, this rule makes it such that players drafted in the NFL have had more time to develop at an appropriate competition level than the other 3 leagues, making them more pro-ready. Overall, these hampering factors are mostly set in stone for their respective leagues. Teams in the NHL and MLB have shown that they're mostly okay with these league structures. They like having deep pools of prospects from which they can develop talent, and they like getting the draft rights to 18-year-old prospects to develop them in their minor league systems. Given that, it's very unlikely that either league would be interested in changing their draft eligibility rules to force players to spend additional years developing in college or other leagues before they're draft eligible. It's also unlikely that high school hockey or baseball will drastically improve to enable its players to reach the pro league sooner. As for the NBA, rosters will remain small and the number of star players in these drafts will remain limited, for whatever reason that may be. And again, these may be moot points. Even if the high school and college leagues for these 3 sports grew in talent and retained that talent for more years, there is simply no reasonable expectation that they would grow in popularity to rival that of college footballs. They are truly in different stratospheres in terms of popularity. Even the March Madness tournament can't topple the ratings dominance of the college football playoff. However, these aren't the only reasons why the NFL draft continues to dominate its competition. Within the NFL's control are 3 factors that give its own draft the major edge over the others. The first factor is the NFL's investment into the event. If you watch the other 3 drafts and then watch the NFL draft, you will immediately see a difference in the production value and the quality of the set. In recent years, the NFL draft has been hosted in different cities, occupying major portions of that host city for each draft. In 2019, the draft was hosted at Lower Broadway in Nashville, completely shutting down the thoroughfare and turning downtown Nashville into a massive scene. The 2021 draft was hosted in Cleveland, next to First Energy Stadium, across from downtown and situated right on Lake Erie. And in their greatest extravagance to date, the NFL hosted the 2022 draft in Las Vegas on the Bellagio fountain, where prospects were ferried to the stage as they were drafted. This isn't meant to throw shade at the other league drafts. However, the NBA draft is always hosted at the Barclays Center. The NHL draft is hosted at various arenas around the country, and the MLB draft has been recently hosted at theaters and convention centers. Again, I'm not throwing shade at these other drafts, as these are the appropriate accommodations for the event. However, the NFL's ability to host the draft at these locations adds an element of grandiosity. When you watch the NFL draft, they will be abundantly showing the setting throughout the production, keeping viewers interested. In addition to a grand venue, the NFL brings out superfans from all 32 fan bases to view the draft from their so-called theater to cheer and celebrate as their teams make their picks. These fans add excitement, energy, and overall funny entertainment to a broadcast that could otherwise feel like a drag, given the multi-hour runtime of each day of the draft. Aside from that, the NFL puts on a draft experience at the venue each year, where fans can have access to exhibits, games, autograph signings, concessions, and more, all with standing room access to view the draft itself. Tens of thousands of local and national fans visit the experience every year, driving revenue for the league and adding an overall desirability to the event. Seeing activities, fellow fans, and current players on the broadcast not only keeps things interesting, but it drives interest for future events, inevitably driving fans to travel to future drafts. This 3-day festival-like approach to the draft is unique to the NFL. All 256 picks are televised on major TV networks with multiple angles of analysis from ESPN, NFL Network, and more. On the flip side, the NBA draft is a one-night event that only covers 2 rounds, and the NHL and MLB drafts are only typically televised on the main networks for the first round. Every one of these aspects greatly contributes to the NFL's draft production value. Combine these factors with the NFL's institutional edge in broadcast quality, and you will immediately notice the difference between the NFL draft and the field. The second factor, albeit more minor, that the NFL has going for it is the level that mock drafts, fan speculation, and general hype building plays into it. The aforementioned scouting hype machine of the Senior Bowl to the Combine of the NFL is crucial in hype building, and it's yet another unique process that the NBA, NHL, and MLB simply do not have. Of course, they all have the equivalents of combines and pro days, but the process is so much less covered than the NFL, and it doesn't generate hardly any hype for the draft itself. A newer development is that the NFL's process is supported by a strong culture of mock drafting to stir interest leading up to the draft. Almost every reporter, journalist, and media personality makes multiple mock drafts throughout the process, which always takes control of the media cycle and the Twitter trending tab. In addition to this, mock draft tools have become mainstream and gamified, giving any fan with an internet connection the ability to become their team's general manager and draft players from the upcoming class. These tools do exist in a much lesser extent for the NBA and NHL, however, they are much less accessible and used. The third factor, which is maybe the most understated yet foundational factor that gives the NFL draft its dominance, is the NFL's popularity itself. By now, we all know that the NFL is by far the most followed and watched sport in the United States. The NFL averages 9 million viewers per game, compared to about 1.5 million viewers for a nationally televised NBA game. The Super Bowl is watched by over 100 million people, while the NBA Finals usually average 10% of that. Football is so much more popular than every other American sport, meaning we can expect its draft to be proportionally as popular. So, can the other leagues learn from the NFL? Well, for starters, fan experience and accessibility is very important for overall viewership. Both local and national fans being able to travel to the draft to experience the sights and sounds drives major interest and revenue for the current draft and for future drafts. Additional investment here can go a long way. However, at the end of the day, the majority of advantages that the NFL draft has crafted always comes back to the popularity of the NFL and the popularity of football. And unfortunately for the other leagues, these changes are likely insurmountable without a massive overhaul of the leagues, and a more popular draft is more than likely not worth that effort. That's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing for more NFL content just like this.